publicly discredited and abandoned. Everywhere is war. Me say war. War in the east, war in the west, war up north, war down south. As we are confident in the victory of good over evil, fight the real enemy. Hello, I'm Derek Wheatley, and welcome to episode 184 of the Wheatley podcast. Thank you very much for joining us wherever you are doing so. A massive thank you to Lou McMahon, who came on last week to talk about composing music, the power of creativity when it comes to mental health, and the power of music when it comes to mental health, which is another big thing that we kind of forget about, remembering the things that make us happy and make us joyful. For people who don't know what I just read out, that is the lyrics from Bob Marley's War, which was covered by Sinead O'Connor on Saturday Night Live in 1992. When at the end of it, she ripped up a picture of the Pope and the shit hit the fan, basically. This is an episode, as you may have noticed from the title, So Long Sinead, about Sinead O'Connor. And I thought it only fitting to do an episode. I'm recording this on the 31st, so it's only 5 days after the passing of Sinead O'Connor. This is coming out, obviously, a bit later. But I thought it kind of necessary to do it. And I didn't want to jump on any bandwagons. And I don't want to, go out and say, oh, I had all her albums and I was her biggest fan, and because I didn't have all her albums and I wasn't her biggest fan. I had, and I checked this after she passed, I had 6 of her songs, on my my music selection on Apple Music. I had the Chieftain song, The Foggy Dew, which she sang on also, so we'll say 7 in total. But what I did know about Sinead O'Connor and what I admired about her is a quite a long list. So I wanted to talk a bit about it, and I wanted to, when I heard the news, and I think the national mourning of someone like Sinead O'Connor always makes you a little bit sad, in the fact that you wonder, did she realize how many people loved her and how many people admired her for what she did musically, but maybe more importantly, what she did as an activist and politically, on the kind of global stage, which she did, and really taking a hit on her career on some of the stuff she did, just because of what she believed in. I don't know if there's many artists that stand up there with her for those kind of things, as an activist, to be putting things on the line for the good of, humanity, over the good of her own, personal career, and how she would be seen as a songwriter and a musician. So I thought it only right we talk about her. I was reminded immediately when I found out about my interview with Dave Randall, which is back, I believe, episode 134. He played on one of her albums. One of his friends suggested him to Sinead O'Connor, to be like a guitarist that would suit what the style that she was going for in that album. So obviously Dave is only too happy to help. So I listened back to what we talked about Sinead O'Connor, and it was recorded in August of last year. And around that time, Sinead O'Connor had released, a couple of videos on, I think it was Twitter, but social media, where she was clearly very upset, struggling mentally, struggling to cope. And I asked Dave about the difficulties of that, and in fairness to Dave, it's not his, it's not, I guess, in his wheelhouse. He was never in that position, so it's hard for him to talk about in that way. But what he did talk about was vindication, and how everything that Sinead O'Connor spoke about and spoke out about, she was vindicated in the long run. In the short term, like I said, did bad things for her career, but in the long run, we look back now and realize that the stuff that she was highlighting was actually happening, and she knew it, and lots of high powered people knew it, but they were unwilling to do anything about it. And she was going to go out there and take the hit for everyone, basically. Um, so from look, I really want to talk about what I know about Sinead O'Connor, and what I you know thought about her and think about her now, and run through kind of some of the stuff that she did do, in case anybody hasn't didn't know some of the amazing things that she did. It's really, I think it's really worth pointing out, to see from where she came from to where she went to, and where her position in the kind of musical scene, and the how we see her now. You know, after her passing, really, but how did we see her before her passing is maybe a completely different story, because some people are unwilling to look at those videos and know that they're a cry for help, and people are only too willing to talk about, oh, she's a weirdo and she's a lunatic, and the usual stuff we hear when people are too ignorant to face the fact that mental health is out there. So I there's a few things I want to talk about. There was something quite interesting that I learned about Sinead O'Connor, about how she had a very difficult relationship with her mother, and um, she would, for instance, her mother would send her out in the garden when she was 8 years old to live there for periods at a time, for like a week or two. And Sinead O'Connor used to talk about um, being afraid of the dusk, because that was when this light turned out, and this light being, her mother would turn the light out at night. And there's a song called Troy on her first album. She says it's her most, personal song that she ever wrote, and it's definitely worth going and listening to. But it's a kind of a harrowing song anyway. And for what I kind of found out about it, when she sang about when she sang Nothing Compares, and singing about all the flowers in the backyard, she used to think about her mother, and that's what would make her upset. So obviously this was something that was deep, early personal trauma. She was sent away at, I think it was 14 or 15, to a home, basically, because her mother said she couldn't cope with her anymore. Sinead O'Connor had done so. I'll just call her Sinead from now on, but she'd done some petty theft and stuff like that, and her mother said, oh, I can't cope. So she was sent to this care home, which was right next to a Magdalen laundry. And we all know, the history at this stage. We all know the history of those particular institutions. And again, she saw that firsthand at the young age. And she says that she spoke to people who were in the Magdalen laundries, and for the reasons they were in there, to do with, becoming pregnant at a young age. And, Sinead would eventually start standing up for abortion rights in Ireland. Not fully because of that experience, but partially because of that experience, and how that left an impression of her, of these young girls who was thrown into a pretty horrible place. Obviously, she actually became pregnant herself at a quite a young age, and um, the she had signed up for her record company at that point, and the record company basically asked her to get an abortion, because this wouldn't work. And it's the same reason that they wanted her to have long hair and a short skirt, because she was pretty. And this is still a thing today, that young attractive girls are going to sell records, and be damned with the what'll happen with them afterwards. And like, this is right up to modern day. There's still something that affected Britney Spears, for example, amongst many others. But yeah, so she did get pregnant at quite a young age, and so there was that kind of, the music thing was going on at the time. She went to London, and she became what I really like about this kind of story, that I can relate back to my personal experiences of reading and finding out about what Sinead was up to at certain points in her life. So at that age, when she went to London, she joined up with the reggae community because they lived close to her, because the Irish and the reggae, the Irish and the Jamaican communities lived quite close by. And she said they were her favorite communities, and she was so happy that they both, joined up together. And I love that she talks about, like, after she becomes famous as well, about the gay community, and she made friends within the gay community and they accepted her, and she had never seen gay people where she was from. And it's her first time being, she there's a great clip of her going out into a gay club, and she was singing I can't remember that song she was singing. It wasn't one of her own songs now. It was a kind of a jazzy standard, and she just walks out in this kind of suit and cigarette and a can of beer in the other hand, and there was just something particularly cool about it. And but she said, like, she made friends, and these people would, two or three people would become her kind of team as regards to makeup and style and things like that. Not that she didn't have her own style. I mean, there's one thing we can't say about Sinead, is that, like, she wasn't a good dresser, because, man, every time you see her on these old clips, like, the style of dress is just incredible and so striking. So she went over and she recorded her first album. I think a lot of people didn't realize, well, maybe not a lot of people. Hang on a second, sorry, but certain amount of people didn't realize that Nothing Compares to You wasn't on her first album, and it wasn't her first hit. Because I think people, that was obviously that was the massive breakthrough, but she released her first album. She wrote a lot of the songs, including Mandinka. So everybody will know Mandinka, maybe not off the title, but as soon as they hear it, they'll know the song. And it's a brilliant song. And I read that it was the first time that she wasn't a confident guitar player, but it was the first time she could let loose on a guitar, that it was a free flowing movement of how she played it. So if you hear it, it's quite punky sounding. And I think that's what's really interesting about her music in general. If you want to see a really cool clip, if you go into type in Sinead O'Connor 1988 Pink Pop, and it'll come up her playing Mandinka and Troy back to back. And Mandinka, she's got the band there, including the bass player. Oh, I can't remember his name now. I love the Smiths. The bass player and the drummer from the Smiths, Mike Joyce on the drums, Andy O'Rourke on the bass. I remembered, I saved face in the last moment. And they're in the band, and she really liked the Smiths. More on the Smiths later. But if you'll see her playing Mandinka with the band, and then you see her playing Troy, and Troy is essentially like, it's the song I talked about a minute ago, but it's just like two chords, really. There's very little that moves away from that musically, but it's such a powerful performance, and she's in front of like a huge crowd just on her own. Just it's pretty amazing, and go and check that out. But also worth noting, in the year of our Lord, I don't know why I said that. In 1989, or is it 88? I'm bad, sorry. I should have written this down. Of the Grammy Awards, she went and did Mandinka, right? So at her request, she wanted to go on stage on her own. And so she walks out on stage, this massive stage, right? And I don't want to get drawn into this thing of, oh, this tiny girl on stage. It's not even about the size or the gender of the person. It's about a person being fully committed to a performance without fireworks and mad dancing and any kind of little things that make it kind of seem bizarre. But what I think is so amazing about it is, right, so this is her first album. She hasn't been nominated for Grammy this year, by the way. She would be nominated the following 2 years' time for her second album, and obviously for Nothing Compares to You. But for this one, she hadn't been nominated. So she's performing this song, and she's wearing a pair of jeans. I think I learned, I thought it was a crop top, but that's apparently not what this is. This is called a halter top. I'll be doing fashion tips from now on. Live segments of fashion tips. But so she's wearing a halter top. I think she's wearing her Doc Martens that she normally wears. But what's the two additions that I really like? There's a onesie hanging off the back of her jeans, as there is in the Pink Pop performance, but it's her little son's onesie at the time, just hanging off. Looks kind of bizarre. And people probably look at it at the time going, they can't come home and Google what the hell was that in the back of that young lady's jeans. And she's got in the side of her head um the Public Enemy logo, right? Public Enemy were a rap group at the time who had decided that year they were nominated for rap album that year, but they decided that they were going to boycott the awards because the awards were not inclusive with regards to diversity, basically. And the rap segments of the show, the song, rap song of the year, rap performance, rap album, were never included in the live broadcast. So they were kind of pushed aside. So Public Enemy decided not to go. So Sinead O'Connor decided to get this Public Enemy on the side of her head. And Chuck D from Public Enemy spoke about it afterwards, and he just thought that it was very brave, a very brave thing to do, essentially, with someone with a lot of integrity, which kind of sums her up. But yeah, go and check that out. She just sings it live. She sings it live, right? She got a backing track on, and she's only got one ear in. If you're a nerd like me with regards to music, you'll know that if people are doing live performances, they'll have two earpieces in so they can hear the backing track. So she could only hear what was coming through with her one ear and the actual stage sound system. And I read a couple of comments about someone who knows what that's like, say that's a particularly tricky thing to do. So, and her voice is brilliant, and she does like have these particular jerky movements that she does, but there's no fireworks, there's none of all that kind of nonsense that you'd see, but it's just one person taking over the whole room. And I just think it's great. And I just think it's like one of those things that it's not about looking back and saying, oh, wasn't that great? That was great at the time. It was great when I first saw it. It's great after her passing. It's not something that's become great because of her passing. And I think sometimes that happens. And a lot of what happens in her career is the same. It's great then as it is now. It's not, it hasn't been, you hear that kind of idea of, oh, everybody's, a wonderful person when they pass away. And that can be the case because obviously people will not speak ill of the dead. But, when you're great at what you do in life, you're great then, and that's basically what I'm trying to get across with way too many words. And I wonder when she Nothing Compares to You comes out, written by Prince, who apparently they got in a fight outside somewhere in the States, and he tried to. She said she was spitting at him, and he was trying to kill me. That was her quote. But he wanted her to do another song of his, and she didn't want it. So because this is such a massive, you know, song, like, and I saw some on the documentary that's just come out on Nothing Compares to You on Sky. There's images of her during the recording of the actual video, the up close camera shot, the famous camera shot, and the grounds in which they shot some of the other scenes from the video. And she's laughing and joking, and then they said as soon as the camera would turn, she would be just back to serious again. And it is a performance. Like, it's, she could be thinking about her mom, all the flowers in the backyard, and that's where the tears come from in the video, maybe. But everybody said like she was she was smoking a spliff and listening to reggae or dub reggae, during takes. So I think that's really cool that she could pull those performances out when she had to, regardless of where we dig into that well to get those tears, I suppose. But everybody knows it's one of the great music videos, and the way her face is shot in that, like, because she's obviously I think she's wearing a black polo neck, isn't she? Are they called polo necks or turtlenecks? Scrap the fashion advice thing. But it's one of those. So, and she's obviously got a black backdrop, and it's just her very striking look, and her shaved head, and it's just and the song is just great. So it's kind of chilling. But I don't know how suited. I think of thinking of it now, and it's easy to say this is something that we can talk about in hindsight. Like, how suited are people for fame? Like, and how suited was she for that level of fame that she all of a sudden became just uber famous. And there's a great interview, which if you do want to see, I suppose a really good interviewer talk to her, Arsenio Hall in the States. He was an actor, but he was really well known for his talk show as well, because he was great at interviews. And she's on with him, and she's very flirtatious and joking and stuff. But he asks her why she wasn't attending the Brit Awards and why she wasn't attending the Grammy Awards for 1991. I think that would have been the Nothing Compares to You year. And there's a number of reasons, but there was one particular line she said about, like, she had watched the American Music Awards and she saw some guy get up there and say peace in the Middle East. So this is obviously during the Gulf War. And she said he said peace in the Middle East while he's wearing a jacket made of the American flag, like, design on it. And she just thought that all these kind of things were hollow, but she thought a lot of the things in that industry were pretty hollow. And she wasn't the only one protesting that year, but there was In Living Color, the band, which is this really cool kind of callback to what she did. In Living Color, the band, the guitarist wore a Sinead O'Connor t-shirt. And like, it was like, to say, we understand, or, to kind of reaching across what is it? Hands across the water, whatever. But she's so good in that interview with Arsenio Hall, and she does talk about the shaved head, and he says, like, nobody can really pull that off except you. And she was like, well, it's not really about that. It's more about, like, people wanted you wanted me to be pretty and wear short skirts so I could sell loads of albums, and I didn't want to do that, so I just shaved my head. And it became iconic for it. But I just love that interview, because I just love how at the age of 24, she's only 24 at that, in that interview, how she's so intelligent and articulate about the points she's making. And like, Arsenio Hall obviously had serious guests on, but he was a comedian, so he could switch between that and between being funny. And I thought he did it so well with her, and she was so comfortable with him. And she'd say she'd only go to a award show with him, and he was thrilled with himself. And it goes on, and she sings in it as well. And I didn't write down what she sings, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful performance. So yeah, that was in 91 then. So it brings us up to the bit I read at the start, when she performed in SNL. So you're supposed to perform 2 songs in SNL, right? And she performed the night before. She rang up and said, I'm performing this, but I'm not performing this. I'm going to perform War by Bob Marley a cappella. Obviously, nobody said anything to her about, oh yeah, like, you can't do that or anything. That was obviously fine. So she's standing there, and there's candles, and it's just her. There's a reverb on her voice that sounds amazing. So she's going through, and she's building, and she gets to the end. She starts screaming, children, holds up the picture of Pope John Paul II and rips it up. What's very noticeable or notable about the picture is, when her mother died in a car crash when Sinead O'Connor was, still quite young. Sinead O'Connor took 2 things from the house. I can't remember the first one, but it wasn't anything significant. And she took that picture because she saw that picture as something that hung on a wall of a house where her mother was very religious, but then treated her the way she treated her, which wasn't very Christian-like. So she took this picture, and it's just so amazing to me that out of 2 things, she brought one on national TV and ripped it up. Like, so that didn't mean anything to her regards to her mother, obviously, or maybe it did, and maybe that was kind of a sort of a semi exorcism. But the real point was that she was making a point about child abuse in the church. So you go and do that in America on one of the biggest TV shows. It's obviously not going to go down too well, because it's quite a religious country, as Ireland was back then. But this America is the country that burned Beatles albums because John Lennon made a quote that didn't really matter. But they burned his albums, and the same kind of thing came down to Sinead O'Connor. And even though at the end, like they said, like when she went backstage, she was in great form and she felt great about it. the what might have happened wouldn't wasn't registering with her until the day after, when this kind of came into the news, and then it became what it became. And you know I wonder, did she know, deep down, that this could ruin my career or really affect my career? um did she care that it was going to affect her career in a great way? Did she want to have a career where, like, she had hit after hit after hit? Nothing Compares to You starts off this rolling kind of snowball, and she gets bigger and bigger. Did she want to be in that position? Did she care? Um, I think that her convictions and her integrity and what she believed in were way more important than a few album sales. So the first time, like, I think then I'm gonna have to. This always happens when I'm talking too much. I apologize. I'm gonna have to mute this for a second. Sorry. Excuse me. Um, So 9 months later, she goes to perform at Bob Dylan's 30th anniversary concert, and she gets introduced by Chris Christopherson. Again, this is on YouTube, but again, this shows. I think this is probably one of the greatest moments in musical history. I said this last week on the podcast. So Chris Christopherson says, "A woman who stands for courage, integrity." Sinead O'Connor comes out dressed really well, beautifully, in a kind of suit jacket dress thing. I should stop talking about fashion. And half the people are booing and half the people are cheering. So they start to try to outdo each other. So it's just this noise. And the boos will, I guess, when you're on stage, will always sound louder. So she stands there, she goes up to the mic, she smiles, she says, "Thank you." The sound doesn't go away. She steps away from the mic. The piano player goes to start and he stops. And then she moves, like, makes it really point of standing back again. And Chris Christopherson comes out and you can hear him say, "Don't let the bastards get you down." She says, "I'm not down." Then she walks to her right and she stares the crowd down. And I love that. If you have to, like, I can't do this justice with my words. I'm not that good. I don't have the vocabulary or the talent, but she just stares the crowd down. The piano player starts again. She stops him, and then she starts into an a cappella version of War again. Really starts getting into it as it goes along. Like, really, the you could see she's getting more and more annoyed and frustrated, but also brave. And you know, she knows that she's doing the right thing here. Like, she's making a point that all of this stuff that's going on in front of her isn't going to, like, affect her. She's going to be tall and strong. She gets to the end of it and she walks off. And just as she gets to the side of the stage, Chris Christopherson hugs her. Now, I'm not having to go at him because I think that's the right thing to do. I just wish it had happened 5 feet further back, because if you watch it, you'll see the spotlight goes to her. Kind of, you can still see her, and she's crying there. And I don't think she would have wanted them people to see her crying. And I think it just all hit her when he hugged her. Um, and I would have liked it to happen kind of further back off stage. But I guess he was, like, doing his job, obviously comforting her, but he was going back out on the stage to maybe introduce the next person. And apparently they had a lovely relationship afterwards, and they performed again on Irish television and stuff years later. So that, obviously they have mutual respect for each other. But I just thought, I just felt so, it's such it's a hard thing to watch. It's a stirring thing to watch in regards to um seeing someone as brave as that, because I think a lot of people would have just turned and left, or tried to sing the song they were going to sing and try and outsing the boos, or be louder than the boos. But I'm not sure that would have been possible, because it was a really hell of a noise, and it was in Madison Square Garden. It was like a huge crowd there. So yeah, then she had to realize that this outpouring of hate came then. And she kind of, I suppose, retreated a bit. She was still doing, still recording her music and still selling well. People wanted to perform with her. And there was one thing I forgot to say earlier on, and I think I was trying to kind of build up to it, and I forgot. But that idea of the reggae thing was so interesting to me, because in 2005, when I heard about at the time that she was going to record a reggae album with Sly and Robbie, the famous a Jamaican record producers and musicians as well, and they play drums and bass on that whole album. And she does a great version of War actually on that album. But yeah, when I follow when I try and learn more about people, and sadly, like after the fact, and I find out that they covered this song, and they did this song, and like they did a whole album of Irish music, and they did a whole album of reggae music, and you kind of wondering like, was there any end to that kind of genre flipping that she was able to do? She did a really great version of like No Apologies by Nirvana, which I didn't wasn't aware of until somebody put up um the song on a post on Instagram the other day. And you see that outpouring of love for her since last week, or when you're listening to this a couple of weeks ago, but and how much love people had for her. But the real fans of her, I guess, the people who were there through thick and thin buying the albums and stuff like that, um it's a different level of kind of pain or grief for them, because you've followed this person so much, you've seen all their ups and downs, and the I think a lot of people can kind of look at her and say, well, the reason I like Sinead O'Connor is because she stood up for gay rights, or she stood up for abortion rights, or she wanted something done about the Catholic Church abusing children, or she wrote her first album was a masterpiece, or there's so many reasons, and I think this is what happens with someone like her, an icon like her, and we should remember that she is an icon. There's so many reasons to celebrate someone like that, and I guess for me, I see it as a missed opportunity to have been on that journey fully from the start. But you can't be on them all, I guess. But um, I was talking about Kurt Cobain a couple of weeks ago, and as how important he was to me when I was young. And I remember as a 12-year-old when he passed, and not really knowing anything. How do you like grieve someone that you never met, or and I couldn't, because I was 12 and I had no idea. So my grieving process was like, oh, there's no more Nirvana songs. That's the realization. But then there's people who are able to grieve, and people who will have known Sinead O'Connor, because this is a person who ended up in somewhere like Strokestown in Roscommon. I was reading that she spent some of her later years there, and everybody just left her alone, and just like she went into the shop, and she was sound, and everybody liked her, but they gave her some space, which is probably hard to find for people who have a certain level of fame. And I think that's, I think when she was hurt as badly as she was, she did become a bit of a recluse. Obviously, she still would perform from time to time, and she was releasing albums, but she wasn't I guess, what she could have been had she wanted to be that. If she didn't have I guess the issue she wanted to fight. If she just wanted to concentrate on music, it could have been. She could have been out there and still releasing albums, but she'd done her thing, and people think she's a wacko, because she went on stage and ripped up a picture of the Pope. It's weird, isn't it? Like, it's not like she didn't burn the man. Like, it's a piece of paper. It's like, I don't care like if this whole thing about like what the paper represents, but but like, can we boil it down to what it is though? Like, you crucified a woman, an artist, because she ripped up a piece of paper. Right. If she doesn't like the Pope, or she doesn't like the Catholic Church, no, that's the whole sign. Isn't America the land of free speech, and the land of to practice your own religion and do all those kind of things? Isn't that what it is? But it is until it isn't, until you don't agree with it. And it's clearly not anywhere to practice your own religion, because I mean, all the Christians hate everyone else, and then everybody else hates everyone else. It's just like it's not. It's it's lovely, I know they had their lovely constitution and stuff, but it doesn't mean anything anymore. It was written a long time ago, and you got to revise it. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But the whole thing about the recluse thing is another one that I wonder if did she need um more love, like, or did she not? Maybe she just didn't want that. Like maybe she, because these are things that people think about now because it's the guilt. Um, her son passed away in January of last year, and apparently that was kind of the real, the real heartbreak for her. And she talked about them being like two parts of a whole, and the love of her life, and he was the only person who ever showed her unconditional love, and that's like kind of heartbreaking considering she has four kids, but um, and we saw the videos that she put out after her son died, because the situation was apparently that he was in a home and mental health institute for because he was on suicide watch, but somehow he managed to get out, and then he was found in the Bray area, after taking his own life, and like I can understand why she would not get like kind of get over that and realize, passing on responsibility of a loved one to a home and then letting you down is one thing. And then from the other side, you think like if a smart 17-year-old wants to get out of a place like that, he probably will, be able to get out there anytime. Um, this is just, by the way, this is just me thinking out loud. I don't know the situation of how he got out. I just saw the fallout, I suppose, from Sinead's point of view, and when she put the stuff up on Twitter, and did she ever recover from that incident? That really broke her heart. Because she had, her personal life and all that was always up for conversations, because people would say, oh, she goes out with this fella, or she went out with this guy, and she had a kid with this person. And I suppose that's part of it anyway. If you're famous, that everybody's going to talk about your private like that, like that. But I wonder, did she ever recover from the passing of her son? And at the time of recording, well, we don't know how she passed, so there's only speculation, and I suppose the speculation has been pointing towards, or people have been suggesting, that she took her own life, and maybe she didn't. I know she moved from Bray to London, and she was recording, in the middle of recording an album. Actually, she had 8 songs recorded, and she had a few more to record. I think 4 or 5 more to record, and then she was ready to go. Um. So you wonder about the London thing, because all of a sudden she went for somewhere that's really quiet into something that's kind of hectic and loud, and it's quite a change. No matter who you are, it's quite a change, quite a jump. Especially if you're kind of emotionally fragile, or you do have mental health issues, which she had, and which she talked about a number of times. And you know, being open like that, like maybe people didn't want to talk to her about mental health, but if people met Sinead O'Connor and they had met her for the first time, they're not going to ask her about how she's feeling, or is she doing okay. It's always going to be about her past or her music. It's always going to be about something that's not as deep as mental health can get, and people are still afraid to kind of ask about those things. And I can understand that as well. Like, very few people come up and ask me about my mental health that don't have mental health problems. It's the people who have mental health problems that come up and ask me about mental health, because they're more comfortable with it. The people who don't have mental health issues will rarely, because it is a little bit uncomfortable for them, because they can't quite tap into it. They don't have any experience to go off, so they have to listen to me go about it, and then they have to then try and just be kind about it. And it's kind of a one-way conversation then. So people don't just come up to me and ask me about it. So yeah, I wonder about that for her. What her private life was like with regards to how people approached her. And I love seeing the stories of like Russell Crowe. Some might have seen him talking about her coming up to him, and was it in Bray? It might have been in Bray, but he wasn't even sure who she was until afterwards, and after she spoke to him, um, and I don't know if if it's a happy or a sad story, like her life, because I think a lot of people, if you gave them the chance, they would have that moment of Mandinka at the Grammys and Nothing Compares to You and a Saturday Night Live performance and all these festivals and concerts and all this admiration from other people. You hear the people who come out and talked about it, but the people she performed with around those times, like Peter Gabriel and Van Morrison and um, the Chieftains and all these people, like who loved her and thought she was an amazing artist. And I didn't even talk about her voice. That's mad about this whole podcast. Like I've never once mentioned her voice. That the kind of like there's fragility in a howl sometimes, and I think that's what her voice was like. Um I've heard some brilliant descriptions of people's voices before. I remember, or there's a song about by Bowie about Bob Dylan, and he said he has a voice like sand and glue. But like when I hear her, like there's like a fragility in a howl, and there's like there's strength in it, but this voice could be fragile and it could drop off at any point. And I posted up on. I'm sorry if this is all over the place, by the way, but I posted up on Facebook the other day when I found out about her passing, and I remember a quote from Bono about the singer and the musician Jeff Buckley, and he described him as a pure drop in an ocean of noise, and I think that's what Sinead O'Connor could be described as. At least her voice could be described as something like that. Um, and I think when you see these old clips and her moving RT, sorry, the Late Late Show, and I've heard two people describe it completely differently from each other with the gay burn things. I know someone, they know who they are, who described him as kind of speaking down to her and being kind of patronizing towards her and treating her like a kid. And then heard someone else say they loved when she was on Gay Byrne because he seemed to want to mind her or protect her and be a kind of a father figure for her. I would be more on the first option of that one, to be honest. I think he was a little bit patronizing towards her because she was a girl, and he'd always gone about the hair, and there was always that she was a girl, and back in the 80s and 90s, that was a bigger thing then. There were definitely even less equal than they are now, and what would happen? Here's a question, right? What would happen if, for instance, Bob Dylan had ripped up that picture of the Pope? Just at this, I don't have an answer. Obviously, how would I have an answer? But just as a thinking exercise, what would have happened to Bob Dylan, and would he a few months later have been booed the way he was? Someone said in the documentary, and it's a brilliant quote, and it's a brilliant thought piece. Think of this: a group of people, thousands of people, going to a Bob Dylan concert, who started out as a protest singer, booing Sinead O'Connor, who protested child abuse. What are they doing at the Bob Dylan concert? That was great. I should have noted who said it, by the way, in the documentary. If you watch the documentary, you'll see. But it's a brilliant, point. Like who? I don't know. Like, um, and look, it does come into the fact that she's a woman, and they do think differently of her. And it's like, oh, when the whole thing of when she came out like as a priest, and then she became a Muslim, and she was mad because she did that. You know, like that couldn't have been just a logical route in her brain of how she thought that she wanted to change things or how she wanted to be. It was put down to her being mad. Um, I think like I think she was the most sane person in the music industry at that point. Like, if you look at it, like there was very few in the group with her. Like when you talk about Public Enemy, for instance, they were protesting. They were protesting the fact that black people weren't treated fairly in the music industry. So she was even going further than that, and she was saying the music industry's a heap of shit anyway. And then she was going even further, but to do with child abuse, and she would talk, like I said already, about gay rights and abortion, things that weren't, there is some musicians and artists at the time who were in those marches and who were sticking up for people who were, in inverted commas, different. Um, but she never like seemed to back down from anything. That's the whole thing. And even after her son passed away, she still, well, obviously she was angry at the institute that let her son, get out of their sight. But she knew when she was on social media afterwards, when she was talking about her mental health and when she was talking about the grief and the pain she felt, that her words still held, weight. They went up in the news and everybody thought, oh, it's Sinead O'Connor again. She's mad. Um, she knew that people were going to say that about her because people have been saying about her all along. But she still came out and said it. And if people like Sinead O'Connor aren't going to come out and say it, then mental health is something that I talk about. Is still not going to be talked about out there, in this country or in any, countries in general, I suppose. So for her to still be on the front line of protesting for people who maybe don't have the voice, the loud voice that other people have, um, like what more can you say about someone who does that, who's going through a certain amount of pain and still out there? And people feel guilt about the fact we didn't do enough, and we didn't show her enough love. And these are all valid, opinions and expressions, but there's there is, unfortunately, there's only so much we can say and so much we can do for somebody in that amount of pain. I'm talking about me and Sinead O'Connor. I'm not talking about our family. I'm just obviously talking about people who are from the outside looking in. There's only so much we can do, and we can put up, if she's putting up something on Twitter, we can put up a little message underneath, but she may not even see the message underneath. These are only the small things that we can do. Did she want to be left alone towards the end? I would say probably, but who knows? We won't know. Um, but how we should remember her is we should remember her for calling out things, and like Dave Randall, my guest back in episode 134, said, being vindicated for every single thing she said. We should remember her for having a awful childhood and still pulling through, becoming, an international sensation, pop star, a style icon, leather boots, leather jacket, shaved head, being someone who loved the communities that maybe weren't looked at the same way as the Caucasian male community, such as the reggae community and Jamaican community she talks about, and the gay community. We should remember her for the baby onesie on the back of her jeans in the Grammy performance. We should remember for that Grammy performance with Mandinka. We should remember her for standing up for people who had been abused by one of the biggest organizations in the world and taking a massive career hit on that. We should remember for staring down Madison Square Garden and then jamming the lyrics for war down their necks. Um, we should remember her for taking all that hate on her own shoulders and still standing up for other people afterwards, like, the abortion rights and trying to change the thing in this country. We should remember for this little nugget where she couldn't find her passport or her driver's license for the gay marriage referendum, and she rang up Panty Bliss and asked her what she could do, what else would she need, and how could she get the vote. And Panty Bliss telling her, "You're Sinead O'Connor, for God's sake." We should remember the fact that she was different in some of the best ways, you know. That's important as well because you know it's very easy. We everybody do we all want to be the same? Do we want all our people that we look up to be the same as everybody else? Of course we don't. Remember for still standing up for mental health, even though she had been going through probably the worst, some of the worst pain that any parent could go through. Um, but yeah, do you know, you remember go to your Spotify or your Apple and whatever you music thing you follow, download her songs, listen to her songs, go to YouTube, the ones I recommended, watch those clips, and remember that this was like a person who was like a genuine Irish hero when it comes to arts and entertainment. We do not have a huge amount of people we would call heroes. We kind of have legend and hero is different, but hero I would have Sinead O'Connor in the hero category. Let's hope that the talk online of people wanting her to, it was actually Stephen James Smith who was on here before, who talked about getting a statue of her on O'Connell Street, and I think that'd be a wonderful gesture. Um, but whatever you do, just remember, watch the documentary, and you know, rest in peace. Um, I want to thank John for the tech support. I want to thank my mum, my dad, my granddad, Jaron Calvin, and I want to thank Sinead O'Connor. Subscribe to us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, etc. Thanks everyone for watching and listening to this one. Yeah, it was a joy to talk about her. Um, take care. All right, where's the button? Bye.